There was a particular quality to the morning before a board presentation. Not tension. She had moved past tension years ago, somewhere around her 7th engagement, when she had finally understood that the feeling she had been calling nerves was actually something closer to readiness. Body, registering that it was about to do the thing it had been built to do. She had been ready for this one since Tuesday. Today was Friday. She had spent the week after her diagnostic interviews doing what she always did with raw data, sitting with it, not analyzing it. She could analyze in real time. She had been doing it for 14 years, sitting with it, letting the pattern that was already there become visible without forcing it. The pattern at Hanryeo Group had become visible on Thursday afternoon. It had not surprised her. It had, in a specific and professional way, offended her. She finished her coffee. She picked up the portfolio. She went to deliver the autopsy. She opened without preamble. She said, "I was engaged to identify the source of Hanryeo Group's organizational dysfunction. I have identified it. I will describe it precisely, and then I will describe what addressing it will require. I would ask that questions be held until I have finished, because what I am about to say is structured, and interrupting it will not make it easier to hear." She did not look at the face that went still. She noted it. She proceeded. She began with structure. Every organization she had ever diagnosed had a stated purpose and an actual one. In healthy organizations, these were close enough to each other that the gap between them was a management problem. In dysfunctional ones, the gap was so wide that the stated purpose had become a kind of fiction the organization maintained for external consumption, while the actual purpose, protecting the people at the top, preserving existing power arrangements, ensuring that the cost of failure was distributed downward and the benefit of success was collected upward, operated without acknowledgement. Hanryeo Group, she said, had one of the widest gaps she had encountered in 14 years of this work. She moved to leadership. She said, "Organizational dysfunction of this depth and duration does not emerge from systems. It does not emerge from strategy failures or market conditions or communication breakdowns. It emerges from people. Specifically, it emerges from the person at the top of the organization and from the culture that person's leadership has created, rewarded, and protected over time." She said, "The dysfunction at Hanryeo Group is a direct reflection of the leadership at its center. It is not a symptom. It is a portrait." She saw it. She had expected it. She continued. She had saved the 4th section for last. The 4th section was the one she had underlined twice. She said, "In the course of my diagnostic interviews, a name emerged consistently in the accounts of people at every level of this organization. It emerged in the way that significant names emerge in dysfunctional systems. Not directly, not with attribution, but as a reference point, an explanation, a reason why something was done or not done, or done differently than it should have been." She said, "When a single name functions as an explanation for a pattern of organizational decisions spanning multiple years, that name is not incidental to the dysfunction. It is structural to it." She said the name. She said it the way she said everything in this room, evenly, precisely, without emphasis, as a fact. 3 of the 12 people at the table produced the same controlled non-reaction she had cataloged in her diagnostic interviews. 2 produced something closer to relief, the specific exhale of people who have waited a long time for a thing to be said out loud. 1 produced something she had not expected. The board member at the far end of the table looked at his hands. Not the controlled absence of reaction she had seen from the others throughout her week at Hanryeo. Not surprise, not relief. recognition. She was watching the board member. He had waited with the patience of a man who understood that leaving too quickly would itself be information, while two colleagues approached Sienna with the professionally appropriate responses to a difficult findings presentation. He had waited while the chairman excused himself with the brittle courtesy of someone managing a response he had not yet fully formulated. Then he had stood, gathered his materials with the unhurried precision of someone who did nothing quickly and walked toward the door. He paused at the end of the table. He said without looking at her, "Your methodology is thorough." She said, "Thank you." He said, "I imagine your findings will require some time to process." She said, "They usually do." He said, "I hope the organization responds appropriately." Then he left. "I hope the organization responds appropriately." A board member who was implicated in the dysfunction would have said nothing to her or would have said something that distanced him from the findings. A board member who was entirely uninvolved would have offered a collegial acknowledgement and moved on. He had said, "I hope the organization responds appropriately." That was the statement of a man who knew something specific about the consequences of it not responding appropriately, and who, for reasons she had not yet determined, wanted her to know that he knew. She added a new symbol to his entry in the matrix. Not a question mark this time. An arrow. Sung-hyun had the full report by noon. It had taken his team 18 days from the night of the incident to trace the waiter's handler through 3 shell arrangements, 2 subsidiary layers, and 1 corporate registry entry that had been deliberately obscured with the specific sophistication of someone who understood exactly what they were hiding and had planned accordingly. What they had found at the end of the chain was a name that sat inside Hanryeo Group's ownership structure like a stone in a wall, load-bearing, invisible from the outside, essential to the shape of everything around it. Jae-Won read the document without speaking. He read it a second time. Then he said, "How long?" Sung-hyun said, "The subsidiary structure dates back 11 years. The specific arrangement that funded the handler was established 8 months ago." Jae-Won said, 8 months. Sung-hyun said, "Yes." 8 months ago, someone inside Hanryeo Group's ownership structure had begun funding the apparatus that would eventually put a poisoned glass of whiskey on a tray in the Grand Hyatt Seoul bar. 8 months ago, Sienna Delacroix had been in New Orleans, preparing for an engagement she had not yet agreed to take. She was now inside the building where the money had originated. Jae-Won said, "What do we know about who brought her to Hanryeo?" Sung-hyun said, "The engagement was brokered through a mutual contact. There is no indication she has any knowledge of the subsidiary structure or its connections. Her diagnostic work appears to be exactly what it presents as." Jae-Won said, "Appears to be." Sung-hyun said, "I would stake the network on it." Jae-Won was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She is in that building every day." Sienna had spoken the name at 9:47 in the morning. Sung-hyun had placed the same name in front of Jae-Won at 2:15 in the afternoon. Neither of them knew the other had encountered it today. They were working the same problem from opposite sides of a wall neither of them could yet see. Sienna's matrix now had 6 columns and 1 annotation she had made in the margin that she would not have been able to fully explain if asked. It said, "Source, not witness. Possible asset. Possible risk. Does not know which, yet." Jae-Won's calculation had acquired a new variable he had not accounted for. The woman inside Hanryeo was not incidental to the investigation. She was inside the building where the attempt on his life had been funded. She was conducting a diagnostic that had already identified organizational dysfunction connected to the same network. She was doing this without knowing any of it. He looked at the note card. Your security detail requires significant retraining. He thought about the board member who had looked at his hands. He thought about the arrow Sienna had not yet drawn. He did not know about the arrow. He drew the same conclusion. Fear is not a management strategy. Sienna Delacroix had said this once early in her career to a client who had asked her how an organization becomes dysfunctional. She had said, fear is not a management strategy. It is a confession. When an organization runs on fear, what it is confessing is that it has nothing better to offer. No vision, no trust, no genuine belief that the people inside it are worth more than their compliance. She had said it again today, in a boardroom on the 43rd floor of a building that had been running on fear for longer than most of its current occupants had been employed there. The room had been very quiet when she said it. The board member at the far end of the table had looked at his hands. Across the city, Yoon Jae-Won was looking at a note card and thinking about a woman who was walking into a building every day without knowing what the building contained. 2 investigations. 1 name, 1 building. The wall between them had just gotten thinner. Episode 6, Neutral Ground. The Grand Hyatt Bar. She is there first. He arrives. Neither of them will say it wasn't coincidence. 47 minutes. Neither of them counted. New episode Tuesday. Dark Magnolia Stories.